Hello and welcome to this special show where we'll be talking to some experts in the field of hydration. Now, the main constituent of the human body is water, so it's not surprising that maintaining appropriate hydration of our bodies is at the heart of a healthy lifestyle. Hydration can affect your health, wellness and performance. And I'm joined in the studio today by Professor Ron Maughan, Emeritus Professor of Sport and Exercise Nutrition, Loughborough University and Chair of the European Hydration Institute Science Advisory Board, and Professor Monty Mythen, Smith's Medical Professor of Anaesthesia and Critical Care, University College London and Director of the UCL Discovery Lab at the Institute of Sport, Exercise and Health. Now, we're going to be talking about the facts and the myths that surround what we should be drinking each day. And we're live today, so if you've got any questions for our two guests, please use the box on your screen and we'll do our best to tackle them. And over the course of the next 15 minutes or so, of course, you can tweet us as well while watching the show. So please use the hashtag #HydrationMatters and we'll try and give you a mention. So, gentlemen, welcome along. And Professor Maughan, we'll start with you. Perhaps the first thing we want to establish is what do we actually mean when we talk about hydration, and why is it so important to keep our bodies hydrated?
Hydration means different things to different people. We often think of it just in terms of how much we drink, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. It's really about how much water we have in our body and how the salts dissolved in that water react. Okay. So it's about concentration of water in the body. Okay. And it's important because we must maintain an appropriate water balance in the body. Too much and we run into problems, too little and we run into problems too.
Well, that's certainly interesting. We'll talk about too much a little bit later on. But now you're chair of the Science Advisory Board of the European Hydration Institute. Can you tell us a little bit about the Institute itself and also why its work is so important?
Well, as you said earlier, hydration is an area where there are lots of myths and misunderstandings.
Yes.
And a few years ago, some people got together to say we need to try to coordinate educational and research efforts in this area. So the European Hydration Institute was established as an independent charitable foundation with the aim of trying to promote and encourage research and education in the whole field of hydration.
Okay, very interesting. Now, Professor Mythen, hydration doesn't receive sort of the same amount of attention or sort of media attention, certainly, as nutrition. So why do you think that is?
I think it's because it's not very sexy to most people. So when we talk about nutritional issues, we see the consequences of eating excessively. There's lots of discussions about obesity. We see the consequences of not eating enough and the damaging effects that that can have. So it's discussed a lot. Whereas, as you just heard, being over or underhydrated is possibly as important.
Yeah.
It doesn't attract the same media attention.
And as you say, maybe something you can't sort of see the consequences of as much as you can with overeating or undereating. So what are the signs and symptoms of inadequate hydration then? What would you say?
One of the problems is the signs and symptoms are very diffuse.
Yeah.
Often if people are a little bit dehydrated, they feel a little bit tired, a little bit headachy, they can't concentrate very well, they just don't quite feel themselves. And they put it down to maybe a bit of a bug or something else. Maybe they're just a bit tired, didn't sleep well. But part of it, in some situations, is probably due to mild dehydration.
Right, and in that instance, having a drink of something would actually make you feel a bit better.
Absolutely. If it doesn't make you feel better, then it's probably something else that's causing those symptoms.
Absolutely. Okay, so Monty Mythen, what are the quickest ways to rehydrate? That's come in from Stacey Morris.
Well, for most of us, it's to drink, and to drink quickly, and appropriately, proportional amounts. So if you're very thirsty, feeling very dehydrated, take glass-size amounts of liquid, and we'll come on to which types of liquids in a while, but all liquids that are readily available tend to be good, and then try and address both the symptoms and the feeling of thirst.
Okay, so on that note, then I've got another question here from Maria, who says that the EFSA guideline is that men should drink 2 litres of water a day and women around 1.6 litres. So what she would like to know is how should you distribute that water over the course of the day? Is it better to sip little and often, or is it better to have 8 large cups? Is there a better way?
I think it's important to be clear at the outset. That refers to the total amount of water that should be consumed, not water per se as a drink.
Right.
So you can get that water from a whole range of different drinks. And in fact, the EFSA recommendation is that men should consume about 2.5 litres a day in total,
so
and women about 2 litres. But about 20 or 25 or perhaps even 30% of that comes from the water contained in foods. So if we drink lots of different drinks, we can easily meet that target. It doesn't have to be water, and many people stay perfectly hydrated drinking absolutely no water during the day.
Now that's really interesting then, because that is a little bit of a myth then, isn't it? Because I think we read these magazines and sometimes you see people on the train with these big bottles of water, and perhaps they're actually getting maybe a little too much sometimes.
Absolutely. And there's no magic in the let's exactly prescribe certain volumes of water,
right.
in other words clear tap water, and pace it through the day to a target volume.
Yes.
Most people maintain adequate hydration from the water they get from food, combined with the drinks that are commonly drunk, tea, coffee, sodas, etc., etc.
Okay.
And this sort of obsessional consumption of water in a targeted fashion can result in more harm than good.
Right, well that's good that you mentioned that, because Susan Mills wanted to know specifically whether tea would keep her equally as hydrated as water. I think I drink about 5 cups a day and sometimes worry that I should be replacing that with more water. But actually, is that all right to be drinking a lot of tea?
Absolutely, and it doesn't really matter what you drink.
Right. As long as you've got some liquid on board,
drinks. And a few years ago, it was common to see in airline in-flight magazines, for example, statements like, don't drink tea, coffee, cola, because the caffeine will dehydrate you. Well, if you take lots of caffeine pills and don't drink anything, then yes, you will become dehydrated because they stimulate urine output. But when you take tea, you get a little bit of caffeine and you get a lot of water. And the studies that have been done advising people to reduce their intake of tea, coffee, cola and other caffeinated drinks show actually their hydration becomes worse. Because they don't drink something else instead. And we see perhaps with old people in care homes where hydration is a real concern, telling them not to drink tea is absolutely the wrong thing to do, because they're likely to become more dehydrated.
Well, I'd imagine that's really comforting, actually, for a lot of people to hear. And Sara Fletcher wants to know, she is training to be a long-distance runner, so how should she make sure that she stays hydrated during and after a marathon, which, of course, is a huge strain on the body, so I guess it's extremely important.
The main thing is to practice and training, so you know exactly what you need to do. And if you weigh yourself before and after a training session, you can tolerate a dehydration equal to about 2 or 3% of body weight with no serious consequences. So learn how much you need to drink. But in general, the best guideline we can give people on whether they're drinking enough or not is how often they go to the bathroom, how much they pass when they go there, and the colour of the urine they pass.
Okay, so that's a really good indicator for everybody, actually, isn't it, in general? You can tell just from that.
And make sure that when they're learning about that, that they adjust it for the climate, for the conditions.
Okay, because
there's quite a broad spectrum, you know, to say the very hot weather, the clothing one wears has a big impact. So you can't sort of say, I've reached this formula I believe is right for me and apply it when it's very, very cold.
Yes, no,
absolutely.
Yeah, running a marathon in extreme heat is going to be completely different, isn't it, than on a rainy day. And of course, I think we've got some fairly pleasant weather coming up, believe it or not. So I guess hydration is more at the forefront of our minds the minute the sunshine is out. And, you know, should we really be focusing on it much, much more the minute there is a very hot day? Are we much more in danger of becoming dehydrated?
Our body's pretty good at keeping us hydrated, you know. We need to drink enough, and if we don't, we become thirsty, and that tells us, hey, you need to drink a little bit more. So if we just pay heed to the symptoms and the signs, we'll stay pretty well hydrated. Now,
there's another thing that you often read, I don't know whether it's true or not, that sometimes you feel hungry and you eat when in fact you're thirsty. Is that sort of a true one, or is that an urban myth?
No, there's an element of truth to that. So you can get some degree of suppression of hunger by dealing with what's actually thirst that's mixed in with it.
Okay.
But you can also satisfy both of those things if you happen to be drinking things that have calories in them.
Yes, okay. So there's been a recent study, very interesting, connected to dehydration and how dehydration can make you make mistakes whilst driving, which is rather terrifying, isn't it? So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, this study came about as a successor to a lot of studies that have looked at performance of various different tasks. And people have looked at various skilled tasks in the laboratory, and they get people to do funny computer tests where you have to remember numbers and count backwards and look at colours and all sorts of things. But they're really artificial. So the aim of this study, which was carried out at Loughborough University, was to say, let's take a real-life situation like driving a motor car, albeit a simulated car, and look at people when they're well hydrated and when they're dehydrated. Now, those studies have been done quite extensively to look at things like tiredness when people are driving. So we all know you shouldn't drive when you're tired. They've looked at the effects of alcohol, and we all know you shouldn't drink and drive at the same time. But you should drink, just not alcohol, because if you're a little bit dehydrated, the study showed you're more likely to make mistakes.
I've got a theory on that on long journeys people might not drink because they're worried about having to go to the loo. Do you think there's something in that therefore they end up dehydrated?
Indeed, if you're in a hurry to get somewhere, you don't want to take 20 minutes out of the trip to stop at the service station, but it's better to get there in one piece and not have that accident on the way. So staying well hydrated really does make sense.
Absolutely. Now, given that there's a general lack of understanding about hydration and its importance to healthy living, what do you think that can be done to raise awareness of that issue?
Well, I think there's making sure people understand it is an important issue first is right up there.
Yes.
And then a more sensible application of the advice that is given. So, as we've referred to already, there's been this suggestion that one can only hydrate with water, with the clear liquid water. Whereas if one accepts the fact that there is water in all drinks, and the important thing is to first deal with one's thirst and then match that to one's feelings, symptoms, match that to what it's like when you go to the loo. If you just say, well, let's get those things right first, we'll deal with a lot of the issues. Okay, and as a mother of 2 small children, and going into the summer, I think it's something I can get quite preoccupied about in the park when I see them racing around and everything. How easy is it to find out guidelines on, how much your child should be drinking according to their size? Is it sort of information that's quite readily available, or...? There is information, but it's very difficult to apply it to the individual, because some people, some kids sweat a lot and some don't in the same situation. It's different on a hot day compared to a cold day, and it depends how hard they're working, and it depends, as Monty said earlier, what they're wearing. So the best thing is rely on thirst, rely on common sense. If they're thirsty, give them a drink. But also make sure that they do have opportunities to ask for a drink. Because sometimes they get so engaged in what they're doing, they forget. They do, yes. Yes, they never forget when there's an ice cream on offer, but when it comes to needing a drink. And in fact, because Darren Wilson was saying, and it probably has answered that hopefully for Darren, he said, how much does my 6-year-old son need to drink in order to stay hydrated during his sports day? And I tell you, at those sports days, they don't half burn some calories, don't they? So I guess it's just having water on you. And mixed in with that, which I think is very important, particularly for children playing sport, is not just to have water available the whole time. Because a lot of kids don't like just plain water. So there's only so much of it they'll drink. And therefore, if they do have more favoured drinks, favoured juices or favoured sodas, etc., particularly when they're burning a lot of energy, they'll get the combination of the sugar hit and the water. So nothing wrong with a bit of squash or a bit of juice. Exactly. Bit of, even those evil fizzy drinks that we tell each other we should do less of, if they're burning a lot of energy and they're sweating, they're a good alternative. I think this is quite encouraging, actually. Probably for lots of people, it's just about getting liquids on board. It doesn't matter too much what they are, because they all contain water, so that's really, really useful advice. Well, we are beginning to run out of time today, but if you would like to find out more about hydration, then please do go to this website as well. It's going to come up on the screen, www.europeanhydrationinstitute.org. And my huge thanks to Ron Morn and Professor Mythen as well for joining us today, and thank you so much for watching.